The storm approached with a menacing fury, dark clouds swirling above the vast expanse of the ranch like a predator ready to pounce. The ranch boss, Victor Thorne, stood alone on the wooden porch, his strong silhouette framed by the flickering light of the distant lightning. The wind howled around him, matching the turmoil within his heart. He was a man respected by many, feared by most, and yet in this moment he felt the crushing weight of solitude. Victor's life had been marked by decisions that built an empire but also erected walls around his heart. The soft patter of rain began to fall, and as it intensified, he found himself grappling with memories he'd rather forget. Images of lost friendships, broken relationships, and the loneliness that accompanied his powerful position flooded his mind. He had cultivated an image of strength, but this storm unleashed the fears he worked so hard to suppress. As the rain poured, mingling with his thoughts, he heard a faint whimpering sound cutting through the storm. It was barely audible over the howling winds, a desperate plea that tugged at something deep within him. Curiosity piqued, Victor stepped off the porch, his boots sinking into the mud as he ventured toward the source of the sound. There, huddled against a wet and rotting fence post, a small dog trembled, its fur matted and soaked. The pup's big eyes, filled with fear, shone through the gloom. In that instant, something shifted within Victor. He had spent years building an impenetrable facade, yet here was a lost soul, vulnerable and alone, mirroring his own hidden pain. He knelt beside the shivering creature, his tough exterior momentarily melting away. "Hey there, little one," he whispered, his voice softer than he intended. For a man known for his harsh demeanor, those words felt strange on his tongue. As he reached out a hand, the dog flinched but didn't retreat. It was as if the pup sensed the kindness buried under layers of Victor's hardened heart. Slowly, he stroked the dog's scruffy head, feeling the warmth of its body growing slightly less tense under his gentle touch. "You're safe now," he murmured, battling the swell of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. The storm raged on, but Victor's world narrowed to the little creature in front of him. He couldn't remember the last time he had allowed himself to feel such compassion. It struck him as ironic, the most feared ranch boss in the West, kneeling in the mud for a lost dog. This moment felt like a reckoning, an awakening of something long buried. With careful movements, he lifted the dog into his arms, cradling it against his chest, feeling its heart beat rapidly against his own. "Let's get you inside," he said, rising to his feet. The weight of the animal felt like a burden at first, but as he clutched it closer, it transformed into a comfort. The rain lashed against him as he made his way back to the house, but the warmth of the little creature stirred something in Victor, a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. As he stepped inside the barn, the scent of hay mixed with the earthy aroma of rain-soaked soil enveloped him. He moved quickly, shaking off the droplets from his hat and coat before setting the dog down on a pile of dry straw. The pup looked around, its fear slowly dissipating as it took in the safety of its new surroundings. Victor found a blanket and gently draped it over the trembling creature. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and in walked Clara, the ranch's stable manager. She was a woman of passion and grit, with a fierce independence that commanded respect. When she caught sight of Victor, her eyes widened, mostly out of surprise. "What are you doing here, Victor?" she asked, her tone a mixture of curiosity and concern. Victor glanced at her, caught off guard. "Found this little guy out in the storm," he replied, motioning to the dog now curling up in the blanket. Clara's expression shifted from surprise to a soft smile as she approached, kneeling to inspect the frightened animal. "You've got a good heart under that tough exterior after all," she teased gently, but the warmth in her voice was genuine. It was moments like these that reminded Victor why he appreciated her presence. Clara had a way of cutting through his stubborn pride, reaching the man beneath the ranch boss facade. "It's just a dog," he muttered, trying to mask the vulnerability creeping into his tone. "I couldn't leave it out there." "Sometimes it takes more strength to show kindness than to be feared," Clara replied, looking up at him with her bright eyes. Victor could feel the weight of her words, hanging in the air like the storm outside. The two of them shared a moment, a brief connection that felt significant and yet challenging. Clara often pushed him to confront his softer side, a side he resented and admired in equal measure. He was used to being the one in control, the one everyone relied on, and yet here he was, standing in front of her, unguarded. Victor cleared his throat, trying to shift the focus. "We should get him cleaned up," he suggested, diverting his gaze toward the dog. But even as he spoke, he felt the unspoken tension linger between them. "Agreed," Clara said, standing up and brushing off her knees. "I'll grab some supplies." As she moved to gather what they needed, Victor felt an odd sense of peace wash over him, accompanied by the lingering storm outside. In that small, quiet corner of the ranch, something had shifted. The harshness of the world felt a little softer, and for the first time in a long time, Victor allowed himself to consider that maybe, just maybe, there was room for connection in his solitary existence. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. As the storm continued to rage outside, the bond between Victor, Clara, and the lost dog began to form, setting the stage for a journey of healing and understanding that no one could have anticipated. The storm continued to rage outside, its fury contrasting sharply with the warmth of the barn. Victor carefully placed the lost dog down on a pile of soft straw, watching as it instinctively burrowed into the blanket he had draped over it. The pup's trembling started to cease, its little body finding solace in the simple act of being cared for. Just then, Clara returned carrying a bucket filled with warm water, soap, and a rag. "Let's get you cleaned up, little one," she said softly, kneeling beside the dog with a gentle smile. Victor observed her as she worked, feeling an unfamiliar swell of gratitude. Here was a woman who understood compassion, who could see beyond his tough exterior, and the reputation that often preceded him. Clara's presence was a reminder that the world wasn't just filled with fear and power dynamics. There was kindness, too. As Clara began to wash the dog, she glanced up at Victor, her brow furrowing slightly. "You know, you did a good thing today. Not many would risk getting soaked in a storm for a stray." Victor shrugged, the corners of his mouth twitching slightly in an attempt to dismiss her praise. "It was just a dog," he muttered, but he knew even as he said it, it wasn't accurate. "Just a dog?" Clara raised an eyebrow, her expression teasing yet serious. "You and I both know that it's about more than that. Sometimes it's the smallest creatures who teach us the most about ourselves." He looked at her, momentarily taken aback by the depth of her words. It felt as if she was speaking directly to the barrier he had built around his heart. His instincts urged him to respond with defiance, to retreat into the armor he'd always worn. But he could see the sincerity in her eyes, a mirror reflecting his own fears and the struggles underneath his hardened shell. "Thanks for helping, Clara," he finally said, his voice gruff but earnest. "I mean it. You're good with animals." "Only because I've had plenty of practice with you," she replied, her laughter lightening the mood. The way she laughed made Victor feel strangely at ease, as if the weight of the world had lifted, even if just for a moment. As they both focused on cleaning the dog, an unspoken connection began to unfold between them. Clara worked methodically, her hands deftly washing away the grime and fear from the pup's fur while Victor stood nearby, feeling oddly transfixed by the simple act. He found himself drawn into her world, one where compassion ruled over authority, and every small gesture carried significance. "Why do you work here, Victor?" Clara asked suddenly, her tone shifting to one of curiosity. "You could be anywhere, ruling over any piece of land you wanted. Why choose this life?" Victor hesitated, unsure how to articulate the turmoil of thoughts swirling in his mind. He had often wondered this himself, often drowning in the expectations of being the ranch boss. He started, but the words caught in his throat. "It's what my father wanted," he finished lamely, knowing that didn't encapsulate the truth. Clara nodded, a knowing look in her eyes. "And what do you want?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Victor felt the ground shift beneath him. What did he want? The question ignited a flicker of vulnerability he had long buried. He didn't have an answer, not really. The storm's intensity outside mirrored the tempest inside him. "I want to keep this place running," he finally said, his voice tight. "Nothing more." Is that really all? Clara pressed gently, her gaze unwavering. Victor turned away, focusing on the dog instead. This place isn't just land. It's about legacy. Family, he murmured, the shadows of his past creeping into the present. Well, sometimes legacy can be a burden, Clara said softly. You don't have to carry it alone. You have people who care about you here. Victor let out a laugh that was devoid of humor. Caring isn't a luxury I can afford. Clara's expression hardened for just a moment before she softened again. But it's what makes us human, Victor. You know that. He sighed, aware that she was right. He had always prided himself on being the strong one, the protector, yet he felt the walls of that identity begin to crack as her words settled deep within him. There was a certain power in vulnerability, a strength he had never dared to embrace. Before he could respond, the dog let out a soft whimper, pulling both of their attention. Clara finished drying it off, sitting back on her heels and surveying their work. It's going to be okay now, little buddy, she said, her voice soothing. You've got a family here. Victor felt the warmth of those words wash over him, as if Clara was not just speaking to the dog, but to him as well. A family? The word felt foreign, yet inviting. In that moment, he understood something fundamental. It wasn't just the dog that needed saving. It was him too, slowly unearthing layers of himself he had buried under years of fear and pride. Do you think we could keep him? Victor found himself asking, surprising both Clara and himself with the question. Clara looked at him, her eyes wide. You're asking me? Well, you seem to have a way with animals, he joked, trying to inject levity into the moment. Touché, she replied, her laughter filling the barn once more. But in all seriousness, yes, I think we could. As they continued to care for the little dog, a sense of camaraderie blossomed between them, woven through shared laughter and quiet moments. Victor felt the storm outside lose its power, becoming nothing more than a backdrop to the fragile beauty of their unfolding connection. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. With every shared glance, every small gesture of kindness, something new was stirring within him. A realization that perhaps he could be more than just the feared ranch boss. Perhaps he could allow himself to connect, to feel, and to embrace the warmth of companionship. As Clara looked up at him, her smile genuine and open, he felt the first glimmer of hope. The storm might have raged outside, but within these walls, a slow, tender transformation was beginning. The days passed following the stormy night that had altered the course of Victor's life in ways he had never anticipated. The winds had calmed and the skies cleared, revealing a world washed anew. Yet, amidst the serene beauty of the ranch, a tumult brewed inside him. Clara and the little dog had become an unexpected part of his routine, and with their presence came a reality he had long since buried beneath layers of fear and authority. As they worked side by side, tending to the chores that defined ranch life, Victor felt the weight of his past decisions pressing down on him. He watched Clara with a mix of admiration and confusion, as she moved about with an ease he had never possessed. Her laughter floated through the air, a sweet sound that somehow made the burden of his responsibilities feel lighter. She had a way of bringing life into the mundane, turning everyday tasks into moments filled with warmth. One afternoon, as they were fixing a fence that had been damaged in the storm, Clara turned to him, her brow furrowed in concentration. You know, she began, her voice steady but soft. The ranch could use a little more than just a boss. It needs a heart. Victor paused, the hammer he had been wielding hanging in the air. A heart? He echoed, a frown creeping across his face. This is a ranch, Clara. It's not a fairy tale. It's about survival, profit, and tradition. Clara shook her head, her eyes alight with determination. But isn't there more to it than that? Isn't there a reason we do what we do? He couldn't answer. She was right in a way. He had long ago lost sight of the purpose behind the labor, the joy of cultivating life, the bond between man and land, and the community that thrived around it. The ranch had become an obligation, a fortress he built around himself to keep everyone out. The truth was that he feared connection, feared the vulnerability it demanded. "That's easy to say when you don't have to carry the weight of it all," he replied, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. Clara's gaze did not waver. "And what if I want to help carry that weight? You're not alone in this, Victor." Her words hung in the air like a challenge, and for a moment he felt his defenses begin to crack. He wanted to argue, to retreat into the safety of his solitude, but something about her sincerity tugged at him. A part of him, a part he didn't even know still existed, longed to reach out, to take her hand and pull her closer into his world. Yet the fear of losing control held him back. Days turned into a blur of labor and unexpected camaraderie. The little dog became a source of joy, a living reminder of the fragility and beauty of life that had begun to seep back into Victor's existence. Clara named him Sparky, a fitting title for such a spunky little creature. As the two of them nurtured the dog back to health, they found themselves sharing more than just the responsibilities of the ranch. They shared moments of laughter, vulnerability, and quiet understanding. Yet, even as they grew closer, something dark loomed over Victor. A tension began to form, and it became harder for him to hide the turmoil brewing inside him. Clara was a light in his life, but his pride was a shadow that threatened to engulf him. The more he felt himself opening up, the more he recoiled, afraid to let her see the scars of his past. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Clara confronted him again. "Victor, I don't understand why you push me away, why you won't let me in." He bristled at the accusation, his heart racing. "I don't push you away," he snapped, more harshly than intended. "You don't know what it's like to be in my position." "Then teach me," she countered, her voice steady despite the hurt creeping into her tone. "Let me understand." In that moment, Victor felt a surge of emotion so strong it nearly knocked the wind from his lungs. He wanted to scream, to tell her that he couldn't bear to show her the cracks in his armor, that his life had been a constant battle between expectation and desire. But instead he turned away, clenching his fists, the familiar walls rising back into place. Just drop it, Clara. It's easier this way," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Easier for who?" She shot back, her frustration evident. "For you? Or for me?" He felt the heat of her disappointment, and it struck him harder than any physical blow. They stood in silence, the air thick with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Then, in a moment of reckless abandon, he lashed out. "You don't get to decide what's easy for me. You don't understand what it means to—" "What? To care?" Clara interrupted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "To feel, to connect. You're right, I don't understand that, but you're not the only one who's been hurt, Victor. We all have our battles." Her honesty pierced through the layers he had built around himself, leaving him exposed. He had pushed too far. And in doing so, he had hurt the one person who dared to reach for him, who saw beyond the facade of strength he wore like armor. Clara stepped back, the hurt evident in her eyes. "Maybe I was wrong to think we could be more than this," she said softly, turning away. In that instant, Victor felt the ground beneath him shift. He watched as she walked away, a sense of loss washing over him. The realization that his actions had consequences hit hard. He had not just lost a moment, he was on the verge of losing her, and the mere thought of it sent ripples of fear through his heart. As the night settled around him, Victor was left alone with his thoughts. The darkness outside mirrored the tumult within, and he knew he could not let this be the end. He needed to confront his fears, to step into the storm he had been avoiding for too long. If he wanted to keep Clara in his life, he would have to allow himself to be vulnerable, to embrace the very thing he feared the most. With a determined resolve stirring within him, Victor set out into the night. It was time to face the storm, both outside and within, and find Clara before it was too late. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Victor stepped out into the raging storm, the wind lashing against his face like an angry beast. The rain poured down in sheets, soaking through his clothes within moments, but he pressed on, driven by a desperate need to find Clara. Each step felt heavy, weighed down by the gravity of the emotional turmoil he had been battling. As thunder rumbled overhead, he felt the very sky echoing the conflict within him. His mind raced with thoughts of their last argument. He had pushed her away when all she sought was to understand him, to connect with him. The bitterness of his own pride tasted sour on his tongue. He could still see her face, hurt, confused, and disappointed. It tore at him, a reminder that he was not just fighting against the elements but against the walls he had built around his heart. The ranch was transformed by the storm, shadows dancing under the flickering light of lightning strikes. Everything seemed alive with potential and chaos, mirroring the duality he felt inside. It was in this chaotic space that he finally allowed himself to acknowledge his fears. He had been so afraid of losing control, of becoming vulnerable. But what he had not realized was that true strength lay in allowing others to see his imperfections. As he neared the barn, he noticed a flicker of movement. His heart raced as he approached the doorway, calling out into the maelstrom, "Clara, are you in there?" His voice was drowned by the sound of the storm, but he pressed on, determination fueling his steps. Inside, the familiar smell of hay and leather mingled with the dampness of the rain. The barn was dimly lit, and as he stepped further in, he spotted Clara sitting on a bale of hay, her silhouette framed by the faint light filtering through the cracks in the wooden walls. She was drenched, her hair clinging to her cheeks, but her eyes, oh, those eyes, held a depth of sorrow that nearly shattered him. "Clara," he breathed, urgency lacing his tone. She looked up, surprise and relief washing over her features. For a heartbeat, they simply stared at each other, the storm outside a mere backdrop to the tempest within. "Victor," she whispered, her voice catching, "what are you doing here?" "I came to find you," he admitted, stepping closer, the space between them filled with unspoken words. "I realized that I was wrong to push you away. I let my pride get in the way, and I'm so sorry for that." His heart pounded as he confessed, vulnerability spilling from lips that were used to speaking only of strength and authority. Clara's face softened, but there was still a wariness in her gaze. "You don't have to apologize, I get it. It's hard to let people in. But you can't shut me out forever." He took a deep breath, gathering courage, finding the right words amidst the chaos of his thoughts. "I'm scared, Clara. Scared of what it means to care for someone, to let them in when all I've ever known is to stand alone." He paused, eyes locking onto hers. "But I don't want to be alone anymore. Not with you." The silence that followed was heavy, charged with emotion, and Victor felt hope flicker within him. "I know I can't change overnight, and I don't expect you to wait for me, but I want to try. I want to be better. For you. For us." Tears glistened in Clara's eyes, and for the first time, he saw the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. "Victor, it frightens me too. I've been hurt and lost for so long, but you're worth the risk. We could both find a way through this storm together." Another flash of lightning illuminated the barn, and in that moment, it felt as if the universe itself was affirming their connection. The storm outside might have been fierce, but inside, there was an undeniable warmth growing between them. As they drew closer, the chasm of misunderstanding began to fade, replaced by a fragile yet powerful bond. "Come here," he said softly, reaching out to grasp her hand. The touch ignited something deep within him, a flicker of hope that blossomed into a flame as he pulled her into an embrace. The world outside fell away as they held each other tightly, hearts racing and breath mingling in the closeness. "Promise me we'll talk," Clara murmured against his shoulder, her voice steadying his stormy heart. "Whenever you feel like pushing away, promise me you'll let me in instead." "I promise," he replied, burying his face in her hair, inhaling the comforting scent of her presence. It was a promise that would take time to fulfill, but it was one he was ready to accept. They remained tangled together for a long moment, the chaos of the storm outside a distant murmur compared to the tranquility of this shared space. As the rain continued to drum against the barn roof, Victor felt the weight of his isolation lifting, replaced by a sense of belonging he hadn't realized he craved. It was a beautiful surrender to the uncertainty of love and connection. They were both lost souls, navigating the wildest storms of their lives, but together, they might just find their way home. The storm began to wane, and as the first hints of dawn broke through the darkness, a new chapter was unfolding for both of them. As they pulled apart, still holding hands, Victor looked deep into Clara's eyes, gratitude and affection swirling within him. "Thank you for being here, Clara. Thank you for being you. Thank you for letting me see you," she replied with a soft smile, the warmth in her gaze igniting something spectacular within him. As they stepped out of the barn, the rain had lessened to a gentle drizzle, the world outside glimmering with the promise of fresh beginnings. The sun peeked through the clouds, casting a golden light across the ranch. Victor felt a sense of hope blossom in his chest, a feeling that together they could weather any storm that life threw their way. "Thank you for listening, and if you liked it, please leave a comment," he said, letting Clara lead the way as they walked back into the day, ready to face whatever awaited them, together.